Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids, elementary, middle, and high school age. And today we are going to be talking about how to do a monthly reset. So let's get started. I help you implement systems and strategies in order to overcome the chaos and cultivate simplicity in your home and homeschool. And one of the ways that I actually do that for myself is to do a monthly reset. Now I have shared monthly reset, yearly reset vlogs on my YouTube channel a lot in the past couple of years, and so I will leave that playlist in the description box so you can kind of see what I am doing. But today I thought I would share with you what a planning day is, what a monthly reset is, how to go about doing it, all of that kind of stuff, just so that maybe you could incorporate this practice into your life. It definitely helps. It helps a lot. And it took me a long time to figure out how to make this work because I was always concerned about putting myself on the calendar because there are so many other things that always need to be done. And for a long time, I always put myself last. And I think that that's kind of common with moms. We tend to do that, not because we want to put ourselves last, but just because there are so many little emergencies that come up every single day. So I do want to share with you how to kind of put yourself first and refresh yourself and get ready for the next month. I have heard of a monthly reset in a bunch of different ways. I originally heard about planning retreats and a cultivated calendar. That was mainly from Laura, who used to own Cultivate What Matters, and Emily Lay from the Simplified Planner brand. Maybe back in 2015, I first started hearing about these days where you would take time to plan the next month, think about your goals, really do all of the things that you need to do in order to prep for the month ahead. And over those couple of years, maybe 2015 to 2017, I started reading a book regularly called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, I think is how you pronounce his last name. It's more geared towards businesses, but in it he does talk about giving space for his employees and himself to brainstorm and really think about different ideas. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about this in a business standard. I'm talking about this more from my personal life, but I think that it can be used both ways. And in fact, if you've not read Essentialism, it is a great book. It's pretty short. I definitely think that it is worth the read to kind of think about what your most important tasks are, how to give yourself space to think about the things that you need to. It's a really, really good book. So I've heard about all of these different ways of taking time to plan ahead or to deep dive on topics that you don't feel like you've had time to think about, or just to sit and contemplate. And at first I thought, wow, I'm not sure that I could take a day to do that. And I'm an introvert, so sitting in quiet and thinking is kind of my jam, but I didn't see how it would be a thing that I could do with my family. And at this point, my kids, I had 3 kids. They were like 7, 5, and 1, I think, is around when I started doing these planning days or monthly resets. And it was challenging. I couldn't give myself a full day because I was still taking care of the kids, and I planned them on the weekends, which was probably my first mistake. But the whole purpose of a monthly reset is to give yourself the space to think, to dream, and to plan. And it doesn't mean that you have to sit down and do all of the things that I do. I spend a large amount of time going through all of my different calendars, making sure all of that stuff is updated, family calendar, all of that. That's because that is what works for me. But there are so many different ways that you can have this day. I have seen people that will keep a notebook, kind of like a brain dump notebook throughout the month, and then on their thinking day, whether it's monthly or quarterly, they will go through all of that information that they just didn't have time in the moment to process and figure out what to do with, and categorize things so that they could start to make progress on all of these thoughts that they were having. And I think that that is also a great thing to do. I think taking time to plan your goals out for the next month, to give yourself a day where you can maybe work on some goals, some bigger projects. I've used my monthly reset to kind of not catch up, but work on bigger projects that I know that I have for the month. I use it for homeschool planning and prep, to do more research. It's really just a day that is set aside that I can do all of those things that I know that I need to do, that I've been thinking about doing, or that I just need to process in my own way. Setting aside that day gives me a time. And I know that while things are crazy throughout the month, I've already put that date on the calendar to sit down and go through all of those things. So when do you take a monthly reset day, or a planning day, or a planning retreat, or a think day, whatever you want to call it? Well, when I first started, I only did it quarterly, and I put it on a Saturday because I thought my husband is home, my kids are little, I need that time. And I was giving myself maybe 2 hours in the day to work on things. Now, it doesn't have to be a full day of quiet solitude, but it can also be a full day of quiet solitude. After a while, I did this for a few years where I would plan to take that time on the weekend. But what ended up happening was it was taking away family time, because obviously my husband's home on the weekend, and I didn't want to do that. So instead of having a day, I would have a couple of hours here and a couple of hours there. And then Jen McIntosh from, I think her website is Wildflowers and Marbles, maybe. I will leave a link for her in the description box. Many years ago, I heard her talk about taking a homeschool admin day in the middle of the week. And she just planned it into her schedule, and it was a day that they weren't doing school, or they were doing self-directed learning, and she didn't need to worry about the school stuff, and she just took that time for homeschool admin. Well, I thought to myself, why don't I do that as well? And so I think maybe in 2017, I started putting the date on the calendar as the last Thursday or the fourth Thursday of the month, and that has become my monthly reset day. And I set out those days at the beginning of the year. When I am planning out my year, I sit down and I write out the dates that I want to do my monthly reset, depending on things that I know are going on throughout the year. So obviously, the fourth Thursday of November is Thanksgiving. So I tend to not do my planning day or my monthly reset on Thanksgiving. It is a little bit of an abbreviated day the week prior, because that's when we stop our traditional homeschool curriculum for our long winter break. And that just kind of works for me to do it then. And then my monthly reset for December is actually more of a yearly reset. And it's kind of that week between Christmas and New Year's that I take to do a lot more deep diving on all of the things for the next year, as well as just getting things ready for January. So I have started setting aside that day as my monthly reset. And do I keep to that every single month? No, I don't. There are some months that things come up. I'm sick, kids are sick, we end up having appointments on that day or whatnot, or there's practices or activities outside the house, and I can't take that time that I had originally decided on. And those months are harder for me, because what I end up doing is kind of doing it over a few days, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, before the month starts again, the new month starts, and it can be a little bit more challenging because I feel a little more frazzled. When I take the day that I set aside for this monthly reset, I feel so good about going into the next month. I feel like I've wrapped my brain around all of the things that happened in the previous month, and it just works best for me. So you can choose a day, any day. You don't have to have it the last Thursday of the month like I do. You could have it on a weekend day. You could have it in the middle of the month, if that's kind of how you run your months. And actually, one thing that is a little bit different, I used to do all of my financial planning also on this day, but then a couple of years ago, my husband's pay periods changed. And so I do financial planning at a different part in the month, whereas I used to do a lot of that budgeting, thinking about finances and all of that stuff on my monthly reset day as well. But now that has been removed from my monthly reset and I do it at a different point in the month. It is okay to put yourself on the calendar in the middle of the week. I know that as homeschoolers, it can be challenging to say, we're not going to do school today because mom has to do these other administrative tasks almost, or just to be able to sit and think about all of the things that are going on in your life. But it is okay to do that. And my kids have kind of come to expect it. And obviously, as they've gotten older, they are able to still continue with the majority of their work. But I am not doing like read alouds or discussion-based things with the kids on that day. I do still do school with Lucy first thing in the morning, but her school this past year was second grade. It did not take us very long to just get through the basics of, her reading practice, handwriting, math, and history was mainly what I would do on that monthly reset day. We do it first thing in the morning, and then I'd move into my monthly reset. So what do you do on this monthly reset day? Honestly, it can be whatever you want it to be. What I do is I take the time to set up all of my calendars for the next month. I do a lot of paper planning. Obviously, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I appreciate lists and am the most productive when I do those things. So I set up my family calendar that we keep in our kitchen, our sort of family command center, if you will. I set up my personal calendar, make sure that I have all of my appointments for the month already written down in the calendar so that I'm not missing anything, which has happened before. I used to try and use my phone for a calendar and to keep appointments in there, and I would miss things quite a bit. So I take the time to write out my personal calendar. I do my goals for the next month. I sit down and update my goals and think about what I want to work on in the month ahead. I set up my monthly projects, my weekly rhythms, my daily habits, the things that I'm tracking, big purchases that I know are coming up, that kind of stuff. I also update my reading journal, which is something that I started doing last year, and it's just making sure that I'm writing down my books that I have read and updating Goodreads. And then I do spend quite a bit of time on homeschool plan and prep. I will grade anything that needs to be graded that I've put off. I update transcripts. I will research new resources and materials. If my kids have come to me, or if I've noticed that they have another interest or they need a little bit more advanced work in a particular area, I will use that time to research as well. I try to make little adjustments monthly in our homeschool. That seems to work the best. And when I'm only looking at homeschool, I look at like the next 4 to 6 weeks at a time on my monthly reset day. So I go over any questions that we're going to be working through. I look at the books. I make sure I have all of the notes read so that I can answer questions if my kids have questions. All of that kind of stuff, and kind of map out where I want to be at the end of the next month. And that works really well for me. And then I do my homeschool planning weekly, just kind of knowing where I want to be at the end of the month in the particular resources we're using is good, as well as giving me a chance to look for new resources that the kids may need to expand upon their interest-led projects. I also will sit with a notebook and write down anything that comes to mind. And I generally do this throughout the month. Like I mentioned before, I have read about people that will keep kind of a brain dump notebook throughout the month, and then on their thinking day or monthly reset or whatever you want to call it, they will go through all of those lists of things and kind of categorize things, cross things off that no longer are important, or research things. I do this a lot. I constantly am having little sticky notes that I will stick in my planner of things that I want to work on at a later date. Obviously, these are not things that need to happen right in the moment. They are just things that come to mind, especially like books that I'm interested in or books that I want to read. If there are topics that I want to discuss in my membership community or content that I want to share on YouTube, all of that kind of stuff, as well as just different ideas for habits that I want to work on, rhythms or systems in my home that I want to concentrate on. If there are things that I think that we need to do for our house that I want to discuss with my husband, if there's a big purchase that I think about or a project that I want to work on, all of that stuff, I do kind of just make notes as those things come to mind. But unless it's something that I really need to deal with right in the moment, I set it aside to work on during my monthly reset. And it helps with overwhelm, because then I'm no longer having to think about things as soon as they come to mind. Because when something comes to your mind and then you stop doing whatever you're working on to concentrate on that one thing, it breaks up your day. It's harder to get back into the task that you were doing before. It's like for me, when I'm in the shower, I tend to have a lot of random thoughts come to mind. And so I keep a notebook in my bathroom so that I can write them down when I think about them, but I don't need to deal with it right then. It can be stuff just as random as things that I need for the house, or a book, or an idea that I have to do with the kids, or something that I want to work on that I think will be a benefit to me, all of that stuff. And then what I'm able to do is on my monthly reset day, I've set aside that time to concentrate on those things. So the fact that I'm giving myself time at some point in the future to address the concerns that I have or the topics that I want to think about more, it gives me permission in the day-to-day to not have to focus on those things. I just write it down and let it go. And that helps so much with the feelings of overwhelm. It really cultivates simplicity in my home and my homeschool, because I'm not constantly flitting between all of these different things floating around in my head. There are always a million things going on in my head. And if I try and concentrate on them, that's the point when you become so overwhelmed, your life becomes chaotic because there are too many things going on. But if you know that you have time set aside to think about those things, you're able to let them go in the moment. And so that, I think, is the bottom line for why I continue to have a monthly reset day. It's because I don't want to have to think about all these things throughout the month. And when I know that I have time coming up to think about what I need to think about, or to research things or work on a project or whatever, it makes my life the other weeks in the month just so much easier. So tomorrow is actually my monthly reset for April, and I will probably vlog it. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be working on yet, but I will share that with you later, probably in May at some point. But I wanted to do this video just so that maybe you could sit down and look at your own calendar and plug in a couple of days. It doesn't need to be for the entire year, although if you want to sit down and write out a date for each month, May through December for 2023, that's also a great idea. I want to give you permission to be able to sit and do these things. It's okay if you're not moving and being productive in the physical sense constantly. There are so many other things that are vying for our time and our thoughts. So take this time to flesh out what you need to make sure that your calendars are ready to go for the next month, so you're not thinking about things. Write down your goals. It doesn't have to be a ton. It doesn't have to be all of the things. But if you're overwhelmed, I think that it is good to take this time and just kind of sit in quiet to think about it and to reflect, to figure out what you want to do next. It gives you some time to just quiet your mind. This isn't a day where you sit down and watch movies and, like a recreation day. It is a work day, but it isn't like a physical work day. It's more the thinking work. And I really believe that when you set aside the time to do this thinking work, it relieves so much pressure and stress throughout the rest of the month. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I know it was kind of a lot of information, and it's very personal as to what you're going to work on during a monthly reset day. You may not have as many calendars as I do, or you may be working on one project for an entire year. That may be your goal, but are you able to break it down into smaller steps so it feels more manageable for you? You may not feel the need to make as many homeschool adjustments or do as much homeschool research and prep throughout the year as I do, and that's totally okay. That this monthly reset day is really for you to decide what is most important to you. What are the things that are on your mind? Maybe it's financial planning, maybe it's goals, maybe it's calendars, maybe it's homeschool research, maybe it's reading specific books or doing research for a project that you want to take on. Whatever it is going to be personal to you. But I just want to give you permission to set aside that time. It's important to do that, and it's okay to do it. Now, don't set aside this day and then fill it with a bunch of appointments. Set aside a day that you know that you will be home and that you can spend the time thinking through these things. And if it's hard for you to sit in quiet and think, that's okay. Oftentimes, I think that it's harder when our lives are chaotic and there's so much stuff going on. We can't sit still and really flesh those things out. And so it could take you several months to figure out what type of rhythm you want in this monthly reset day, and that's okay. I would definitely recommend getting a notebook and a pen, not anything digital. I do use my computer some during my monthly reset, but a lot of it is more paper and pen and getting all of the thoughts out. When I write the things down, my brain releases them because it knows that I'm dealing with it in the moment. So I don't need to deal with it later on. I can just let it go. And so take a notebook, just brain dump in it, and then start seeing where you need to go from there. And it doesn't have to be a full day. I would encourage you to take a full day. Mine sometimes is a full day, usually when it's nicer weather, but sometimes I am just trying to get the work done that I know that I need to get done during that day, and it only takes me a couple of hours. But if I am able to take more time and really sit with a lot of the feelings and thoughts that I've been having, it's so, so helpful. So I will leave a link for the George McEwen book, Essentialism, in the description box so that you can check it out. Another great book is The One Thing by, I can't remember the author's name, but that is also another great book that kind of talks about your most important tasks and really focusing on those first. And you can get creative with your monthly reset if you're able to leave the house and leave the kids and go do it in another place, or get a hotel room for a night, or go to a coffee shop. If you like to have that energy around you while you're thinking about things, definitely try and do that. It doesn't have to be. For me, I just like to sit at my dining room table and my kids are around me kind of doing their own thing. And I also work with my kids a little bit during that monthly reset so that they are also thinking ahead to the next month, more my older kids. I want to thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have questions for me, please leave them in the comments, or you can always use my contact form, which is always in the description box. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.